105.5 WDHA. I'm such a big fan of this man and the band's music that he's made over the years from the Moody Blues. Good morning, John Lodge, and welcome back to WDHA.
Hey, Jim. Good morning to you and all your listeners, of course.
So you've recently released Days of Future Past, My Sojourn, which is your take on this incredible album. Tell me how this came about.
It was, I wanted to keep the Moody Blues music alive, and I was trying to think how to do it. And I decided to do a live version on stage of Days of Future Past. And I went to Graham Edge just before he passed, unfortunately, and I said to Graham, would you record your poetry? I'm thinking about doing Days of Future Past on stage. I said, as well as recording you, I'm going to video you. So you'll always have a place on stage with me. And he said, John, I'd be honored. He said, I've never recorded my own poetry. And yes, keep the Moody Blues music alive. So during the rehearsals, and as I was getting near to doing the concert live, I thought, we should record this. Because it's so different. It's the same but different. With Graham on there and John Davison from Yes joining me, and I've got a lot more electric guitar on the album, but it's still the same essence of Days of Future Past. And I thought, yes, it's really important for me because Days of Future Past was the beginning for me and the Moody Blues. And it's been part of my life forever. And so I wanted to reflect that by saying, my sojourn, this is my life. It started with Days of Future Past. And that's how the album came to be.
A few weeks ago, we had the premiere of a documentary on the Beach Boys, and it sparked some interest again in that band and Brian Wilson and Pet Sounds. And John, I've gone back and I've listened to some of that Pet Sounds album, and obviously a remarkable recording. It influenced so many people. The Beatles come out with Sgt. Pepper, and again, there's this influence of everybody. They changed everything with the release of that album. But even before Pepper came out, you guys are working on the original version of Days of Future Past. Sgt. Pepper has not been released yet, but you go into the studio with a sound that nobody was doing at that time. Where did that come from in its infancy?
I think, well, I suppose it goes back prior to that, because when I worked for 4 years before the Moody Blues with Ray Thomas, and that during the time I worked with Mike as well, Mike Pinder. So when I joined the Moody Blues, I was talking to Mike, and I said, what's your image? What do you want to do? I said, because I don't want to play any more cover songs. We've been playing cover songs for 5 years. I've never been to America, so how could I really interpret a song from the Memphis or the Delta or Philadelphia or Detroit? I have no idea. And Mike said, no, we're going to write our own songs. And I said, that's it. So we started writing our own songs and we ignored everyone else. We decided not to go the AM route. We decided to go the underground route, which is called at the time. We didn't know we'd ever get a record contract. So we started playing our own material on stage. And it grew, we sort of realized what people wanted to listen to. And we were experimenting with our sound. Mike had got the Mellotron, and he was taskmaster at that, beautiful. And of course, Ray Thomas on the flute and our harmonies, it just was different in itself. And we realized we weren't going to play the blues anymore or rock and roll. We're just going to play our own music. And it was interaction with all of us, because all of us sang, it was interaction of all that gave us our sound.
You know, I'm trying to think of another rock band that used a flute, and obviously Jethro Tull comes to mind, but that was even after you guys had come out. And obviously flutes had been used on pop music for years. A session musician would play it, but not as part of the band. What made you guys say, yeah, we can do this? This can be a whole part of our sound.
Well, Ray used to play mouth organ, the blues mouth organ, and he said to me one day, "Hey, Rocker, put anything in my mouth and I can play it." it was simple as that. And he got a beautiful ivory flute, black ivory flute, which had an incredible tone, and he just learned to play it. He just learned to play it. It's as simple as that.
One of the things that I've always liked is when genres cross and in some cases just collide. And I think the last time you were on with us a few years ago, John, we may have talked about this record, and it's Moody Bluegrass. And I have volume 2 here, and it's bluegrass musicians doing Moody blues songs. And I would never in my wildest imagination have thought, yeah, what a great idea. But John, this album, this works start to finish. Tell us about your involvement with that record.
Yeah, it was amazing. As a guy called Randy at Nashville said, "I want to do bluegrass Moody Blues." And he was like, "You what?" We couldn't believe it. And he did it and sent it the album. And I thought, that's really different. And I like bluegrass anyway. I like country music. And I thought, that's really... And he said, well, we're going to have a show and feature the album at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, the Grand Ole Opry. Mm-hmm. He said, will you and Justin come along, and Graham, and come and see the show? And I said, yeah, of course. Well, when we got there, of course, we saw the Ryman Auditorium, saw the piece of wood where Elvis stood and everyone else. And Randy said, John, do you want to sing on stage with the guys? I said, I'd love to. Yeah, let's do it. So I went on stage and Justin did, and I sang Send Me No Wine. And it was interesting, really, because when they introduced the band, they said, this is so-and-so, 15 Academy Awards winner. This is so-and-so, 3 Grammys. And they went on all these accolades, and they came to me and said, oh, nothing. Yeah, it was a great concert. I loved playing on stage with the musicians are brilliant. And I actually went on Insta. They made when we recorded Send Me No Wine, I was in the studio with the players, and it was a brilliant time to be in Nashville. You know, I love Nashville. You know.
Amazing music scene there for sure. You know, before we came on, we were talking a little bit about technology, and it got me to thinking about, you know, the early days. The Beatles had stopped touring, of course, because they didn't feel they could recreate the sounds that they were making, Sgt. Pepper and what have you. You guys come out with Days of Future Past. You mentioned the Mellotron, which allowed you to duplicate some of what you were doing in the studio. How difficult was it to perform albums like Days of Future Past, given the technology of the time in the late 60s, John?
I think we mastered that, to be honest, because we took the song of the recording and decided which are the main bits of the song that people are going to associate with. That's what we've got to capture on the stage, because, you know, the PAs weren't that brilliant at the time. You know, they're stuck on the side of the stage. And we were using, I think, a 400-watt bass amps and 4 speaker cabinets, and the wind coming from the speakers was immense. But we just decided which is the main part of each song, and we projected that on our live concerts, and people recognised the sound from the highlights of the song, you know.
And with technology changing, all these different instruments, digital instruments, how much easier is it now to recreate that classic sound of the Moody Blues?
It's takes a lot of time beforehand, a lot of rehearsal, but you can. I've just bought. On stage I use a Line 6 amplifier. It's a system. It's not really an amplifier, but you could reprogram the exact sound you want, and it'll be the sound every concert, and it's brilliant. You know, you don't have to wonder. And I've just bought a Spark amplifier, bass amplifier, and you can say 60s bass sound. Oh yeah, I like that. It sounds like me recording in the 60s on my Fender Precision, and yeah, the modern technology is really good. But if you use it in the right way, I think you mustn't let the technology decide what you've got to do. I think you've got to use the technology, make it do what you want it to do. You know.
We should point out that you are bringing your tour to the State Theater in New Brunswick on July 13th. That's a beautiful building, and I imagine the sound is just going to be magnificent, John. Having seen the Moody Blues a number of times and watched you perform over the years, I was always amazed by the sound of the band, and the music, of course, is timeless. So I think this is going to be a great show in July.
I'm looking forward to it. I like being in New Jersey. There's something about New Jersey, which is, you know, Moody Blues town.
Well, indeed, you can get all the information on John's website at johnlodge.com. And again, the name of the album, Days of Future Past, My Sojourn. John, thank you so much for joining us this morning here on WDHA. Best of luck with the album and this tour.
Thank you, Jim. All the best. And thank you to your listeners for keeping the faith.